welcome back to Mondays with Mom, the podcast where my mom, Leah,
Hi.
and I, Jo, dive into her stories, experiences, and the lessons she's hoping I finally take to heart. My mom has always dreamed of turning her life into a book or a movie, and this podcast is our way of making that dream come true, one episode at a time. Right, Mom?
Right, Joey. Thanks for that. And this week, I was thinking about some topic that plagues a lot of people these days that I know has been plaguing you a little bit, Joe. And I remember that it plagued me too, but in a completely different way. And that's the horrendous business of getting a job.
It is a business and a nasty one at that.
Absolutely. And it's become so difficult. Everybody is so super qualified. Everybody's got a bachelor's degree and they've got an honors and they've got a master's. Some of them have got PhDs and there's
Work experience and etc., etc.
Well, the work experience is always, I find, the most challenging one because all these jobs only want you if you've got experience. But if nobody ever hires you to give you or help you gain that experience, however can you move into the job market?
Yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum.
It is, and I think it's especially hard for young people in this day and age. When I was that age, which was many years ago, it was substantially easier. And I would say substantially easier for someone like me who studied something very specific.
And very practical.
But I find in those days, especially if you came from Greek parents had this kind of very narrow mindset and they wanted their children to become, you had an option of doctor, lawyer, engineer. And in my father's case, he added something simple to the list like architect. And I thought, you actually have to be kidding me. Anyway, for me, becoming a physiotherapist meant that I already was in demand. It was fairly easy to get a job. But these days, especially, Joe, when you've studied something like what you've done, which is
marketing and communication.
Exactly, which is considered highly in demand, and everybody wants someone who does social media marketing and digital marketing, but it's still a very vague degree. You don't walk out being called a doctor or a lawyer. I mean,
or an actuarial scientist.
Exactly, like Tina is. But I mean, you would say I'm in marketing.
Which a lot of people say as a title for their job, but it could mean a whole host of things. It could mean that you're in PR, it could mean that you're in advertising, it could mean that you're specifically in social media marketing or, I don't know, lots of different things.
Lots of different things and nothing very specific. And I think the whole process of applying for a job and getting a job is also really complicated. I mean, we've got platforms such as LinkedIn where people write down what their skills are and what they're good at and look for a job. But my understanding is from a lot of people out there that you literally have to be rejected approximately 43 to 63 times before you get the job you really want.
It's a very specific number.
It's quite a specific number, Joan. So I think your rejections haven't hit 43 yet. So your perfect job is still on the horizon.
It's still out there.
Definitely. Whereas in my case, what was quite interesting is my job was almost pre-decided for me. It was almost like God and the universe had conspired so that I had to take a particular path and ended up working as I did end up in my first job at Natalspruit Hospital.
That's pretty interesting that you put it like that.
I always felt because the amount of effort I put into looking for a job was literally below zero. And so I thought this might be an interesting story to tell.
Looking forward to it.
So the way it happened was basically in your fourth year of physiotherapy, you do what they call different blocks. So you will do a block called a neural block, where you could be involved in people who have had spinal injuries, and they could be paraplegics and quadriplegics or other neural issues. You might be involved with people who have suffered a stroke or had a head injury, and you might be involved with children who have had possibly some kind of brain injury in the first 6 years of their life. So you could be involved in cerebral palsy, and all of that would count as a neurological block.
I mean, that's already a hectic block.
That is quite a hectic block. There might have been more than one neurological block. You then would be involved in an orthopedic block where you could be involved with people that had various bone and muscle injuries or had surgery.
What about like sports injuries? Does that fall under orthopedic?
It would fall under orthopedic, or what they would do is have a separate section called an outpatient block, which was a section of the hospital where people would come in where they had minor injuries. So you'd come into the hospital for treatment and then leave and come back in a week's time, for example.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so sports injuries would probably fall into there. You would have a respiratory block where you might be exposed to people who were heavy smokers and were battling to breathe, or people who actually had chronic illnesses such as cystic fibrosis, or someone who had an acute infection like a pneumonia. Then you had an ICU block, and there were all sorts of blocks like these. And one of them, which was something that led me to get my first job, was called a rural block.
Okay.
And everybody sort of dreaded their rural block because you knew you would basically be sent somewhere in the middle of nowhere where you had to work in a rural hospital and live and work there because it would usually be far from where you lived, and you'd be there for a month.
Okay.
4 weeks to be exact. It felt like it was about 6 weeks usually. And the reason for that was the places that you would get sent to. On the one hand, I think it was very good to get that type of experience. It's not necessarily the type of work you'll ever end up doing later on unless you're dedicated to doing that. But it's learning how to work with less resources.
Which is sad that they do get less resources, but lots of rural places are really strapped for medical facilities and like medical tools and
Yeah, and also, to put it bluntly, people that study and you get your degree out there, one of the things that is on your list is also to be making some money. And obviously, working out in an area that's very rural, people generally there don't have money. The hospitals are all government hospitals, so it's not somewhere you're going to go to and hope to prosper. You would probably go there for a period of time more as
an experience.
As an experience.
As work experience.
As work experience, as you say, as a need, if you've got the need, which is a great need, to go out and help people. And also, if it was a requirement, as it was in my case, not that I didn't want to go out and help people, but I was never drawn to the rural scene.
Yeah, you're an uptown gal.
That's me. I'm an uptown gal. I really want to help people, but at the end of the day, I'd like to go back to a small air-conditioned place that has Wi-Fi, possibly TV, let me relax watching some Netflix at night, access to cold water, aircon, just one of these life's simple pleasures.
You know what, Mom? That makes perfect sense to me. I think I'm with you on that one.
Okay, so you're with me on that one. But we were sent, as we had to go in order to graduate, on this rural block. And the way it would happen is the university would pick 1 or 2 people. Usually it was groups of 2 or 3, and send them off to a place. I'm not sure if they picked hospitals out of a hat or if they kind of took a little chuckle and decided, oh, this one's not really going to cope that well there. Let me get her out of her comfort zone. But be that as it may, myself and 2 friends of mine, one of my closest friends, Lindy, shout out to Lindy in Australia, and another friend of mine who somehow I've lost contact with, but if she's out there and listening to this podcast, hi, Sharon. And the 3 of us were sent together to a place called Manguzi.
I mean, firstly, it was very lucky that you got sent with 2 friends. Imagine if you were there with 2 strangers from your program.
No, that's true. I went there with 2 friends. And the other nice thing is that these 2 particular friends were the same 2 I chose to be doing my final thesis with.
Oh, nice.
So it gave us an opportunity, or it should have been a good opportunity for us to work on our thesis as well, and I'll explain why it wasn't.
So this rural block was a really good bonding experience.
It was. It was definitely great for bonding. And apparently, Manguzi the area is a very, very beautiful area. Apparently, it has some amazing beaches near there and has some amazing wildlife. But because we were going there to work, we didn't have any access to any of that. So I have no idea what the surrounding area looked like. And unfortunately for me and my friends, we didn't manage to complete the block as we should have. Otherwise, we would have taken a few days off here and there, possibly, and gone sightseeing, because apparently the area is really, really beautiful. It's situated in the northwest, I think, part of a province of South Africa called KwaZulu-Natal, and it's actually very, very close to the border between South Africa and Mozambique. It's approximately, if I'm not mistaken, something really tiny, like 15 kilometers away from the Mozambican border. And being so close to the Mozambican border, what this meant is that it was only from my house in Johannesburg, it was only about an 8.5 hour drive.
Well, that's nothing.
It was absolutely nothing. And obviously, my friends were going to drive there. They were both South African. They didn't have weird, overprotective Greek parents, which I've been grateful for many times in my life. And they just took one of their cars and the two of them were going to drive there. And my parents said, "What? To drive too close to Mozambique? Like, absolutely no way am I going to allow my precious darling to do that." So my parents did what any good, self-respecting Greek overprotective parent would do. They drove me there.
All the way there?
All the way there. They drove me all the way there, dropped me off, and then drove themselves all the way back in the same day.
Wow.
And the instructions to me were, I must call them. There were no cell phones in those days, but I must call them from the hospital phone when I'm ready, and they will come another 8.5 hours to fetch me and drive me back. So those were my instructions. That was the original plan.
All I can say is, wow, what a plan.
And along the way, my mom was making the appropriate comments as we were getting closer, like, "Oh my word, how are we going to leave our child here? This is not okay." And my dad would do the calming, "It's all right. The university wouldn't send her anywhere where it's dangerous. This is going to be okay. Don't worry." And he was trying to calm her down. And anyone there that knows my mother would know that she's not the kind of person that would calm down easily. In fact, I don't think I ever knew her to be calm at all. So this
sounds like someone I know.
Sounds like someone you know, not me. I have no idea who this person could be. And so this 8.5 hour trip was, needless to say, quite stressful. But we got there and my friends were already there. I think they had had a much more pleasant drive than I had going there. But we all arrived there and they saw my parents and we promised in front of my parents that we were all going to look after each other and everything was going to be good. And then my parents left. And that's where it all began.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exactly, Jo. So we were introduced to our supervisor who showed us to our little room. We had this tiny little room which did have a shared. We had to share with a whole group of other people a toilet. And I was trying to think. The other people were other medical professionals that were on the property, but no one that we knew. And the three of us had this little room that we shared together. Just to put it out there, okay. Even though there was no internet in those days, I'm just putting it out there. There was no internet. There was nothing to keep you entertained. It was a hospital, so we did have electricity because the hospital had a generator.
Yeah,
and
to run all the machines.
Exactly. And needless to say, there were no appliances. There was no fridge. There was no kettle. There was no microwave. There was no radio. There was nothing. It was a bare room with 3 beds.
At least it had the beds.
Exactly. That's something to be grateful for. And as our supervisor showed us around, our access to food was a hospital canteen that would offer breakfast, lunch, and dinner at very specific times. And then there was a small little shop that was called a spaza shop, something, tiny little shop on the hospital premises that would sell a little bit of other odds and sods. And one of the things that shop would sell was it would sell cold drinks. You could buy yourself a Coke or a Sprite, and it would sell chips, and it had a limited supply of chocolates as well.
Okay.
But at least it had that.
At least it had chocolates.
That's very, very important. And then we were shown the different sections we would work in. So my friend Sharon was put in a section where she would be doing mainly chest physiotherapy. My friend Lindy was put in a section where she'd be looking after burn patients. And I think I was put in a section, I blanked some of it out, believe it or not, that would do neurology patients. So the three of us were split up, and my understanding was that after a week or two in each section, we would rotate. So we would each get a chance to go through each other's sections.
Interesting, okay.
And the one section that neither of us or none of us were working in, because it isn't really a section that physiotherapists get involved in, was the psychiatric unit. And they had a psychiatric unit there, but unfortunately, being a rural hospital that wasn't well stocked, it didn't have enough beds to cope with the psychiatric patients. And I've read up on it subsequently. And apparently, although this is a practice that is frowned upon sometimes, it is quite, unfortunately, common in certain rural areas, and Manguzi was no exception to this, to when you run out of beds in a psychiatric ward, to chain your psychiatric patients to a tree.
What?
Exactly, Jo. It sounds and is as shocking as that. People, especially people that they're worried that might be a danger to themselves or they might be a danger to other patients, get chained to trees. And the only good thing about this is that the people are outside, and they are often the type of trees they chain them to are trees that have an option of shade. But it is unfortunately a practice that, although people are trying to weed out in South Africa altogether, still happens to this day and age.
I had no idea that was a thing. That's insane.
It's insane. But at the time, being a physiotherapy student, and you would be walking around the grounds, and suddenly this man would be charging at you. Your heart rate would be going crazy. Your adrenaline would be sky high. And just before he reaches you, he stops because he's held back by his chain. It was horrible to see and also very, very scary at the same time.
That sounds very scary.
It really was. I mean, I'm thinking about it now and I can actually feel my heart rate increasing. There was one particular man that scared me more than all the others because he really seemed totally crazy. Whenever I would walk past, he would make these weird noises. He would beat his chest like he was King Kong. And he would charge at me. I was petrified. I promise you, I would take any route I could to avoid this guy. But unfortunately, you had to walk past him if you wanted to get to the canteen. And if you wanted to eat and survive, you actually had to walk past this man. It was the most difficult thing. I always tried to be with a friend because I really, really found it scary and very upsetting. Now, to make matters worse for me, anybody that knows me knows that the one thing that I really crave in terms of a beverage is cold water. I need my water to always be ice cold. I'm really...
Literally ice cold.
Literally ice
on
cold.
the brink of being frozen.
I just don't do very well with tap water. I really, really don't. I find tap water very, very difficult to drink. I'm not even a coffee drinker because I don't enjoy drinking warm drinks. I'll only drink iced coffees, and I will drink a hot chocolate or a warm coffee if it's really, really cold out there. But generally I don't. And so what was happening in this hospital is they provided us with an element. Not a kettle, an element. So just the inside part of the kettle, that coil, that silver metal coil, attached to a cable which we could plug in a wall.
And what did you have to put it in?
So we eventually went looking and managed to find one of these weird little jugs, like the ones I remember when I was a kid that we used to use if you were washing your hair in a bath and you didn't have access to a shower head. And it's one of those plastic jugs that's got a handle on it and a spout. I think we even had one at home when you were little, Jo.
Yeah, I do remember one.
And I had that because you couldn't handle large quantities of water over your head at any point in time. I'm not going to go into that episode. That's a separate episode. And so we had this little jug and this element that they provided us with, and we were told that we had to boil the water before we drank it because it was unsafe to drink the water as is. And this became a complete nightmare for me because we would boil the water. It was only a liter, which meant the three of us now needed to share this liter, and the water would never cool enough to ever be anything better than lukewarm. I can barely drink tap water that's at a regular temperature, and this lukewarm water was really, really difficult for me.
So like your worst nightmare.
My worst nightmare. I was becoming dehydrated already. I had been given a limited amount of money, which I had, and any opportunity I could find, I would be running to this little spaza shop and buying myself a Coke just to hydrate myself and to actually have something that would be at least a little bit cool. The other issue I had was that I really wasn't enjoying the breakfast and lunch sandwiches that were available. The food was very, very typical rural food. So at lunchtime, there was a lot of maize meal, that one that's very, very typical in South Africa, the pap.
Pap, yeah.
And it was made in any form you could think of. So at breakfast, there was some runny pap. At lunch, there was some crumbly pap. At dinner. And I wasn't used to this. Although I really enjoyed pap when Taco used to make it for me, their pap wasn't that great. And their sandwiches were a bit weird. I couldn't quite understand what was in them. There was some weird mixture in them, and they didn't taste too bad, but they were crunchy. And a crunchy sandwich is never a good thing.
Well, unless it's got something that has a crunch, like a crunchy piece of iceberg.
Or not, I wasn't talking about that kind of crunch. I'm talking more like the crunch, let's say, of crunchy peanut butter. It was a much harder crunch.
Oh, okay.
So slowly, at this place, I'm sure a couple of days had gone by, and I think I began to unravel. The one thing that sped up my unraveling was Mr. King Kong, tied to a tree, managed to get loose.
Oh, my word.
And I don't know why he had a thing for me, but he managed to get loose. He somehow freed himself from his chain, and he came into the lunchroom while we were having lunch. And there was a room full of people having lunch, and he ignored them, beat his chest, came straight to me, and picked up this glass of water that I was drinking that was maybe slightly cooler than usual because it had been boiled earlier. It was a water that I was getting in the canteen. And he picked it up and said in Zulu, "Uphuza." Now that means to drink. And he took my cup and drank from it and put it down. Now, needless to say, I wasn't planning on drinking from that cup again. And then he took his hand, he opened up his palm and stretched out his fingers and shoved his hand into my lunch, picked it up, and then shoved it in his face.
Oh, my word.
I was a word that I've used before that my husband loved. I was incredulous. I was stupefied. I didn't even know what to do. In shock and horror, I kind of tried to move away from this man who was following me. And I thought, you can have my food, you can have my drink. And from then, I don't even know.
Scary.
I went running out of there at top speed with my friends following me, running, hiding behind trees. I was so scared that this particular patient would find out where we lived and then would come find us at night. He was scary enough during the day. I was petrified. So I stopped going to the lunch canteen. I really stopped. I couldn't bear it. And so all I would do is let my friends go and collect sandwiches for me. And they would come back and bring me sandwiches. And the one day I was biting into the sandwich, which I've told you guys happened to be crunchy, and something jumped out of my sandwich.
No.
I swear, Jo, I swear to you, the thing that jumped out of my sandwich, you can just guess.
Oh my gosh. I don't even want to think about it.
It was a cockroach.
Ew. Ew.
So there where I was in the middle of the grounds, I just threw up. Anything I'd already eaten, I threw up, and I realized how many times I had eaten something crunchy.
Oh, ew.
And I decided that, okay, I can no longer eat the food. I can no longer eat this food. So all I did was I lived off Cokes And they had Kit Kat chocolates. That was the only chocolate there that I could actually eat. And that's what I ate. It was the one name brand I recognized. Thank you, Nestle, that you're even in the rural areas. And I ate my Kit Kats. But I was throwing up frequently. Even the thought of that sandwich, I was just throwing up to the extent that my supervisor came to me and asked me if I was bulimic.
Oh, wow.
And I wanted to try explain to her the concept of bulimia, that possibly in order to be bulimic, you might have to eat something and then try throw it up. And I was not eating anything.
Oh, wow.
I was in such a state. At the same time, what happened to the friend of mine, Sharon, who was doing the chest physiotherapy stuff,
Yes.
is she left her own stethoscope in our room the one day because we had brought our own stethoscopes with. And she thought, okay, she didn't feel like going all the way back to the room. And she thought, it's okay, I'll just use the hospital stethoscope because they had a few stethoscopes just hanging around on hooks in the hospital that you could use. And she put one of these in her ear without sterilizing it, which I wouldn't have thought to sterilize a stethoscope that doctors and nurses use.
Yeah.
Exactly. And put this in her ear. And 2 days later, she had this raging ear infection.
Oh, my gosh.
It was so bad that she could barely walk. She was off balance completely. It was as if she was on the rough seas of a cruise ship. She would start off walking one area and she would end up somewhere completely different.
Sure. Wow.
So we had that, and one day, in complete desperation, because the canteen had closed down, I did the unthinkable. I thought, how bad can this tap water be? I thought I just have to have some cool tap water. I thought, what if I only have, you can tell how naive I was then, what if I only just have a few sips? I'm sure it will be okay. All right.
Yeah. Was it okay?
Well, I started losing weight is all I can say. I started losing a lot of weight.
Sure.
And then my friend Lindy, who we're not sure what happened to her, but my gut feeling is that she carried on eating some of the lunch that was in the lunchroom. She wouldn't eat the sandwiches anymore after what happened to me, but she would still eat the pup. She just started expanding. And we were there with her. We had been watching her. I knew my friend Lindy was not pregnant, but yet it looked like she was pregnant. Her abdomen had begun swelling, and she was feeling nauseous and unwell.
Wow. Do we even know from what?
We don't know from what, but she had some quite severe gastroenteritis when we finally got back to civilization and it was diagnosed.
Sure. So all three of you were really suffering.
So all three of us were really, really suffering. My supervisor was still convinced that my suffering was self-imposed. And I had lost, we were there for about 10 days, maybe 8 days. And I had lost approximately 7 kilograms.
Wow.
It looked like my friend Lindy had gained them, even though she hadn't, because she was so swollen. And Sharon was bobbing her head around as if she had lost her mind altogether. I was worried that they might just tie her to a tree at some point.
Oh, my word.
And so they came to us, the supervisor came to us and sat us down. She called for a meeting and said, listen, the three of you, I really need to talk to you. So
about what?
Well, this is what she said to us. She said, listen, in all my years of supervising students at Manguzi, no student has ever died on the premises. And we looked at her with wide eyes. And then she tells us, you three are not going to be the first ones to die and ruin my reputation.
Oh, my word. Wow.
And she said, tomorrow, I want you guys to pack up and go home. Nobody is going to die here at Manguzi. And I didn't know if there was a good thing or a bad thing. And I couldn't allow my two friends to go back home in their car.
By themselves.
By themselves, because two things. Sharon, please, with that head bobbing about, she was going to drive off a cliff or onto oncoming traffic. She was completely dizzy. And Lindy couldn't fit behind the steering wheel. Her stomach was so swollen. This was serious. And the only person that could actually drive, we did have to take a few stops every half hour for me to throw up, but I was the one person that could drive. And so despite my parents saying that, Papa, our child is not going to drive that distance, I drove the three of us home. And it was
Well done, Mom.
Thank you, Jo. It was a very interesting 8.5-hour drive. I think it took us a lot more than 8.5 hours because we made frequent stops, but I got us back safely.
Sure. Like after that, I think that's the best ending you could hope for.
Well, I thought it was the best ending, and we contacted our supervisors once we had been seen by medical doctors in Johannesburg, and we each had our diagnosis, and we had been put on various antibiotics and things, and we were all going back to normal. And we thought, okay, well, we're going to explain this to the university. They're going to understand that this was their fault for sending us to this place. And they would say to us, okay, well, that was a good attempt at a rural block. Here is your certificate that you've completed your rural block successfully. And they said, there's no such thing. They said, what we're going to do is find you a hospital in Johannesburg that is not quite as rural as where you went, but at least a little bit rural. And so my friend Lindy and I were sent to Natalspruit Hospital. We spent 2.5 weeks there making up for our rural block that we hadn't finished. And it was an amazing experience. We had great fun. We joined the Natalspruit choir. We were completely out of sync and our voices were shocking, but we joined it. We enjoyed the physiotherapy department, and we both blossomed there to the extent that the supervisor at Natalspruit Hospital had approached both of us and said, you two are amazing. I've really enjoyed working with you. And if ever in your lives you want a job, you just show up here and you've got a job.
Oh, wow. So all you had to do was get gastroenteritis and then you've got a job.
Amongst other things that we got while we were there, I think gastroenteritis and dysentery and some ear infections and, I don't know, the supervisor, let's add bulimia because the supervisor said it was that. And that's how I ended up with my first job at Natalspruit.
At least you didn't have to go through LinkedIn.
I didn't, and there were no rejections, none whatsoever, which was kind of awesome.
Except for the rejection at Mangusi.
Okay, I think that was the most positive rejection I've ever had.
All right, Mom. On that note, what are some of the lessons that we can take from this story of yours?
Firstly, guys, if somebody tells you tap water is not safe, believe them. Do not drink it.
That's a good lesson.
That is a good lesson. Secondly, I would say, please, guys, for all of you out there that use a stethoscope, use your own.
Yeah.
Don't use anybody else's. Then I would say, very, very important, do not eat weirdly crunchy sandwiches. If your sandwich is weirdly crunchy, open it up and look into it. And finally, Jo, which I think might be valuable to you too, is always be open because opportunities appear in the most unexpected places.
I think those are some good lessons. And on that note, what are we grateful for this week?
Well, I'm definitely grateful that I managed to share this experience with friends, and especially Lindy, one of my closest friends ever.
And speaking of friends, I'm really glad and grateful that you all survived that.
Yes, Jo, thanks for that. I'm also grateful that we all survived that. And I'm grateful that getting my first job wasn't that traumatic. And lastly, just in case Nestle wants to sponsor us, I'm really grateful for Kit Kats. They kept me going at a time of my life when things were rough.
It's been fun, guys, and also a little bit traumatizing.
But thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.
Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on whatever platform that you're listening to us on if you're enjoying listening to us. And also make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to keep up to date with our latest posts and any fun little throwbacks that we post related to our episodes.
Thanks for listening, guys.
And we'll see you all next week. Bye.
When I can hear your heart.